Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks, and welcome to the Home Building Hub. It is Colin here, co-host with Darren Brennan. As always, Darren, we've got a pretty pumped up episode today. We've been waiting for months to get the right guests on board in terms of learning a bit more about conveyancing, what it is and how it works. So I guess for anyone out there listening, anyone out there watching, this is a very valuable episode. We've got two absolute superstars from a company called Fastrack Conveyancing. You will be guaranteed to receive some great insights and some great advice from the lovely guests we have on. Firstly, Daz, how are you going?
Yeah, going great, mate. You're right. It's taken us a while to find the right people to get on board, and we've gone around in circles and a few times, and then it was great to reach out to the team from Fastrack and get them to agree to come on the podcast. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. So I'll introduce first and foremost. So we have a couple of guests. So Justine is what I would call the big boss. She's the director at Fastrack Conveyancing. Been in the industry for about 26 years and basically opened the 15 years ago or so, 2009 I think it was, Fastrack was opened, and obviously she has massive passion towards conveyancing. Our other guest is Callie. She's a senior conveyancer and also looks after all the Metricon conveyancing side of life and for the Metricon crew there, Darren. So basically, Callie's come from, I guess, before conveyancing, came from real estate, had the agent's reps license, but been in the game for about 16 years, as I understand it. So I guess we got a lot of experience there, and I think, Darren, we're going to look forward to this one. And as I said, for all the listeners, all the viewers, buckle up. It's going to be very insightful, okay? So if you want to know, firstly, a little bit about us, myself and Darren, because you're watching this for the first time, we don't want to harp on about ourselves. So just jump back to episode number 1, introduction episode. That'll tell you all about who we are, what we do, what the podcast is about, etc. Darren, is there a fee?
There is, Colin. We, as always, ask that if you are enjoying the podcast, just share it with a friend, leave us a 5-star review, and it's really easy to do. We've had quite a number left of late, which we really appreciate. So jump on and hit the buttons and give us a thumbs up, and hopefully more people can get great value out of the guests like we've got on today. So
Awesome. Well, Daz, I got my coffee. I'm ready.
I wish I had.
Welcome, Justine. Welcome, Callie. We'll start with you, Justine. Just say hello if that's okay. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting us come along. It's great.
No, awesome. We look forward to the insights. And Callie, how are you feeling?
I'm going well, thank you. Happy to be on here. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. If it's okay, guys, we might kick off. We've got a lot of questions for you that we want our listeners and our viewers, I guess, to hear. First question's this: what is a conveyancer and what do they do?
A lot of people have no idea what a conveyancer is. So even when, as a person, people ask you, what do you do? And you say, I'm a conveyancer. And they're like, oh, okay. And you're like, they've got no idea what that is. But it's basically we do the legal part of the paperwork that transfers the property title into your name. We just facilitate all of the legal work in the background to be able to do that. So we're basically property legal professionals, and that's entirely our focus. A conveyancer is just totally about property and the transfer of property. So that's what we do. I don't want to go into too much boring detail, but basically that's the nutshell of what we do. But we also provide great service, great support through the whole process, insights into, what happens, all the do's and don'ts, reviewing contracts, all of those things. So we can talk more about some of that stuff in some of the other questions. But yeah, that's basically in a nutshell what we do.
We're the unsung heroes behind property transactions.
Yeah.
And people don't realise that until after the property settles. They're like, oh, wow, we understand why we really needed a conveyancer. And also I just want to add, back in the day, a lot of people used to do it yourself conveyancing, but now conveyancing has gone online. So most property transactions have to be done on an online platform called PEXA. And in order to conduct a transaction on there, you have to have indemnity insurance. So people who used to do it yourself can no longer do that. So either way, someone will always need a conveyancer.
Yeah, certainly from my experience, I reckon a great conveyance is a bit like having a great coach. They tell you where to be and what to do and how to do it, and then your job is to go off and do the little bits that they haven't been able to do for you. So, organise the checks through your bank or other bits and pieces. But I'll tell you what they do is they make your life easy. Is a great conveyancer.
Stress free. Stress free. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. What are some of the common benefits, I guess, of the conveyancing service, and what you guys really do there, and I guess, and what should you be offering, or certainly the key items in that space? What would they be?
For my part, I think the main thing is just advice before you sign a contract. So the biggest thing that we try to tell our clients is please don't sign anything until you've come and seen us. We need to review that contract for you. And by doing that, we can also gather information from you, which we do in our initial part of the process, about, are you a first home buyer? Yes. Okay, great. Then you're entitled to concessions. If you're buying land to build on, then you got stamp duty. Potentially you could have nil stamp duty, savings. Is this going to be a primary place of residence, or is it an investment? All of those things make a difference in the transaction. So we gather all that information. And something that's come up quite a bit recently is FIRB approval. You need to make sure that you're doing the right thing by the Foreign Investment Review Board. So a lot of people aren't really aware of what they need to do there. So that's another thing that we can bring to people's attention based on all the information that we gather from them. So really, we gather information so that we can help them in the right way and guide them through that whole process.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, very nice. I think for everyone who's brand new to this, like trying to work out what is a house and land package, how does it all work? If you go and buy a block of land before you sign the contract, this is the message that needs to be clear. You must see a conveyancer. Okay, it's
always
absolutely essential. They are your legal representative in terms of what you're signing in that land contract. And some land contracts are pretty long. It's not like they're 4 or 5 pages; they're hundreds of pages. So you want someone who knows what they're doing.
And under no circumstances, don't ever feel pressured to sign the contract. If an agent's like, oh, you could lose this deal, or you won't get a better deal, someone else could buy it. Just don't fall for it, and make sure you get independent legal advice first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question, I guess one of the things that people would ask is, is there a way for you to provide an indication of essentially how much a conveyancer might cost? So our listeners know to factor this into their overall, I guess, spend.
So for an established sale or purchase, it generally ranges between $900 and $1,500. So, and it just depends on the firm, the expertise, the experience, and then also it comes down to each individual file might have different property searches, if whether or not there's owners corporation certificates, or if the subdivision is managed by an owners corporation, little things like that. It all adds up. And then say if it's a really complex transaction and you might require extensions, or say if you can't meet settlement time frame, and then just different firms could charge for time on top of that rather than a fixed conveyancing fee. So that's a question that you would want to ask the conveyancer as well, if it's fixed or if it's based on time. And then for off the plans, that can range from $1,200 to about $2,500 as well.
So most conveyancers offer a fixed price. It's unusual for a conveyancer to say, this is my price plus, because the industry is very competitive. in pricing. So you have to be on point with pricing, otherwise you won't get the work. So most conveyancers will offer you a fixed price. So I think that you should definitely be trying to find a fixed price. And often with conveyancing, it is you get what you pay for. So sometimes you might find a bargain $700 conveyancer who works from home, who has no backing support and, has very minimal costs, but they may not necessarily be the best conveyancer for you. So you need to just make sure you're doing your research. Yeah.
I guess maybe that leads into our next question, Colin, and maybe I shoot this one straight over to you, Justine, is, how does a buyer determine the right conveyancer for them, and what differentiates one conveyancer from another?
I think a lot of it is to do with how they're set up. So, in our firm, we've got a lot of support. We've got a lot of team members. We've got a lot of conveyancers around us. So if one's not available, then you've got backup, basically, which is important. But really, Google will be your best friend when it comes to trying to find, a conveyancer, as it is with a lot of other things. And just checking out their reviews. If they're smashing it in reviews and they're doing really well, it really speaks volumes, because conveyancing is because property buying and selling is a very passionate business, as we all know. People are highly emotional at that time, and at the end of the transaction, people are so overjoyed. You generally should be getting a great review if you've done a great job, because if you're not getting those reviews, then I don't think you're doing your job properly, basically. So you should be smashing it in the reviews. Make sure that they're focusing on you as the customer, that they're getting a lot of reviews about how they treat their customers, and that the customers are first, and that they're always responsive in their communication, because communication is key in this type of thing. The more communication a client has, then the more comfortable they feel with what's going on, because it can be a very stressful process. Same with, when you build the home, same with the customer communication with the build as well. It's a stressful process. The more you keep them in communication, the more comfortable they feel.
I know from my own experience, I had a terrible experience with a conveyancer many, many years ago, and it certainly wasn't Fastrack. Let me just put that on the table. Our dealings with you guys obviously are fantastic, but it was a terrible experience. And what ended up happening was it delayed the settlement, which then cost penalty interest, and then cost, stress and headaches, and we were all, losing the plot, and and that's why I say, after running that transaction, it really made me concerned about future transactions. I got a new conveyancer. They did a fantastic job, and then you feel really good about it. So it's that, chop and change, I guess, of having the right person that can really coach you through that and make you feel really comfortable about where things are at. So, it's certainly valid to make sure that, cheapest isn't always the best. You usually get what you pay for, right? So be mindful of what that looks like. Absolutely.
Yeah, we often get people that come to us who have who are currently in the process, and they're like, our conveyancer is hopeless. Can you please pick it up? So it's really not that hard to be a good conveyancer. If you just need to, it's very process driven. You just need to be really responsive and keep the clients in the loop and be on top of all the paperwork. So I think that, you just need to make sure you find the right fit for you, and also ring them and speak with them. So many people nowadays just want to email people. They don't even want to communicate by phone. But I think if you actually speak to your conveyancer before you engage them, you'll get a really good vibe as to whether they're the right fit for you as well, rather than just all email or texting communication. I think that's important as well.
It is, and you end up building a relationship with the client as well. So then you'll have ongoing transactions with them. Like, they know that they can rely on you to navigate through other conveyancing transactions later down the track as well.
Yep. That's very good. Like you, Darren, I've had a similar experience, but more on the cost side of things. So I did, I guess, a process for one block of land that the conveyancer, from memory, was $700-800, and this was a few years back. And I would never go down that cheap path again, because I was having to chase them for everything. When I jumped over to another one, I think it cost me, maybe it was $1,500 or so. Could have been a touch more. they were chasing me. They were hunting me down for every answer of every question. And the other part, it's not just reviewing the contract, and we'll share a bit more shortly, but there's actually a few more boxes to tick when it comes to settling. So you want to make sure that the conveyancer knows and have all the ducks in a row ready to go. So you don't get the penalty interest, like you said, Darren, and things like that. So don't just go to the cheapest. And it's the same advice we say to our listeners, and they'll be sick of hearing it. Don't pick the cheapest builder. Don't pick the cheapest block. Don't pick the cheapest conveyancer. Like, it's the same as everything. Like, you need to understand that service is really important, and the response time and the communication you get. Okay, so please be mindful of that. Next question. When is the right time to engage a conveyancer? We'll go to you for this one, Callie.
That would, like I said before, always before you sign on the dotted line. Do not sign anything without independent legal advice, because we'll advise you of your rights, your obligations. We're highly trained to review a contract, and then we provide comprehensive advice, so you're armed with complete confidence and all the knowledge before you jump into the transaction.
Yep. Great. The process might be important. So essentially, if someone's going to a land office to buy a block of land, just for people's understanding, you don't need to sign a contract there and then. If someone's telling you do, that's not correct. You can pay a deposit to lock in your spot for that block, and then you'll be given a little bit of time and grace period, and they'll give you a copy of the contract, and then you can jet that contract straight off to the conveyancer to be reviewed. And how long would that sort of take to be reviewed to get that advice to come back roughly there, Callie?
So generally when we're engaged by a purchaser, they will send them a quote, our instruction form, and then that's subjective to how quick they can complete the instruction form and send it back to us. And then upon receiving that instructions, we'll then review the contract and provide comprehensive advice within that day.
Yeah.
Same day. Yeah, great. And that's because you're trying to keep the client, making sure they keep their block. So the land agent or the real estate agent doesn't sell it to someone else. So understand that. But just that's probably important for people to understand. You can put a deposit down if you like the block. We always stress for your information, guys, that we're happy for people to deposit on a block, but don't go any further until they've spoken to a sales consultant from a builder to understand the site conditions and the site costs and what house you can fit on that block. And it's a bit of, okay, a little bit of land, a little bit of house, and then back to land again. There's a bit of a process there. So this is one of the pieces that people need.
It's equally important.
Yeah, awesome.
Over to me, I think, Cole. Tell me, Justine, one thing we get asked a lot is, can your conveyancer review the build contract? Is that something you guys do generally?
No, unfortunately, a building contract is not part of our scope. Actually, we are not trained in any way to do anything to do with a building contract. It's all got to do with, if you do need to go down that path, you're concerned about a building contract, you do need to go to a lawyer. Unfortunately, a lot of people decide that they don't want to, because you don't actually need a lawyer to help you with a building contract. You can proceed to build without legal advice or with a lawyer's help. It's really your own choice what you want to do at the end of the day and how comfortable you feel with the contract. HIA contracts are a pretty standard form of contract, so there's not a lot of changes that can be made anyway. But, my suggestion whenever our clients ask us that, I just say, look, just make sure when you're building that you've made notes along the way of all of the things that you want changed in the house. You read the contract thoroughly, you read your plans, you read your drawings, you go through all your specifications. If you're still feeling unsure about the actual terms of the actual building contract, then you're going to need to go see a lawyer. But a lawyer can't help you with all that other stuff. That's on you, kind of thing. So, it's really just about making yourself feel comfortable about the process and what you need to do that. But unfortunately, that won't be us. We can't help you with that.
I would say very few people go down the path of getting that contract reviewed. And as you say, they're a standard contract, either a master builders or a HIA contract generally. And they're set up to protect both parties. So, there are clauses in there to help both parties in that. I guess it's just a matter of being aware where that's at. And it doesn't mean it always goes right. There's been obviously a lot of noise around some builders going broke and that sort of stuff, and that'll create challenges for people. But again, there's just things in place to try and help customers through that, I guess. So yeah. Any thoughts there, Cole?
Yeah, I'd say, Darren, yeah, the only thing I'd suggest with building contracts is that they are, I guess, they're provided by, as you said, an industry specialist, I suppose, in HIA, etc. One thing to note on building contracts is make sure you read the special conditions.
Yeah.
That's probably the
Always.
variation between builders. They have different special conditions that they put in there. So that's something that I would flag. As far as land contracts, now we talk about this a bit, Darren. So there's sort of the next few questions relate to this same topic here. So an off the plan contract versus someone who's buying contract titled land. The first question, I guess, maybe I'll go to you, Justine, is what's the difference there, or is there any difference there as to what that means?
Well, there's actually quite a big difference. So an off-the-plan contract is a contract that is subject to the registration of the plan, or title release is what most people will know it as. So you're buying the land basically whilst it's still a big parcel of dirt that has no distinction as to where your property will be at this point. It's just someone's drawn up a plan with your lot on it, and it will eventually look like that. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into that before it gets to that point. So I think when you're buying off the plan, you need to be fully aware of the fact that it's going to be time. There's nothing in place officially yet for you to look at. Whereas when you're buying titled land, the land is already complete. The title's done. So you can pretty much start building straight away. Whereas, with off the plan, you have to wait before you can start building. So it's a time thing. That's the main difference. And obviously with an off the plan, there's a lot more. Generally, you'll find you get an off the plan contract that's this thick, and you'll get a title land that's this thick, because there's a lot more that needs to go in an off the plan contract. And again, that's why you need to get it reviewed before you sign, because there's a lot more that you can get caught up on when you're buying off the plan.
Yeah, same goes for us when we tell people about land, and it can benefit some people financially because it gives them time to save a bit more money. The broker can say, "Yep, get yourself some land that titles in 6 months," and that's great. But if it doesn't title in 6 months, that then can become a headache. So you want to make sure that your price is protected for a good enough period. That's a really important factor for us as well, is if you're buying land that is not titled versus titled land. So title being registered and ready to build on, you can sort of get, once your contract is signed, most builders will get you on site within a few months. So that leads. It's a pretty similar question, Daz. But what's the next one there?
Yeah, I guess what does a title release mean, and what impact does that have on that time frame and the time delays and some of the protections, I guess, that are in place for the customer with respect to that? Maybe Kelly, for you.
This is where it's important to know where the sunset clause is. So some off the plan, or all off the plan contracts will have a sunset date, which means that's when the plan of subdivision has to register at the land titles office. And if it doesn't, it can give rise for the purchaser to terminate the contract, or the vendor to terminate the contract. But that's subject to getting the court order, and it's also got to be consented by the purchaser as well, because of legislation changes, where once upon a time, a lot of developers, if the plan hadn't registered for an extensive period of time, usually land value would increase. And there was a lot of cases where developers would then terminate the contract and then enter into new contracts and selling the properties for a higher price. So that's now being stopped under new legislation changes. But now some sunset clauses would be 42 months, I've seen in some contracts, or 36 months. So that takes into consideration weather delays, delays due to council requisitions and changes they require for the plan to be essentially approved.
Yeah, certainly I was going to say, Cole, those changes have been really positive. that give a lot more protection to the buyer, which wasn't there before. So, you can sort of feel a lot more protected now that you've got rights, whereas previously all the rights fell in the hand of the seller, not the buyer, and they were it was appalling, to be fair. So the really smart change that was made to level up the playing field and give the buyer more power in that situation. Sorry, Cole, you had something to add there as well?
Yeah. Is there a main couple of points that you'd highlight to a buyer about the risks of non-titled land? Like, are a couple of things that you might expect to see in a contract as a result of purchasing, or signing a contract on non-titled land?
Changes to the lot size that you've purchased as well. And generally the contract provides that if there's a 5% material change, then the purchaser can terminate the contract as well.
So I didn't realize there was a 5% change is the actual the detail of that. So that's something I've learned today as well, which is great. So if you're on that being the example, if your block's 500 square meters and they reduce it by 20 square meters, that's okay, is it?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned something today, and I don't like that bit, but anyway, that's another story.
It is a determination of it has to materially affect you to be able to get out of the contract. So they've sort of put in this 5% variance as a guide for that material effect. But like if your block of land is 200 square meters, you know what I mean, and you're losing 5% of that, well, that would substantially impact your build in the future. So you could argue, well, that does materially affect me. So there are options still available if that does happen. You don't just go, well, it's 5%, it's fine. If it can be shown that it materially affects you, you can still potentially negotiate or get out of a contract if that's the case. So
very interesting last few points, Darren. So I think to recap just on that part, so for people who are buying a block of land, if it's titled, it's generally going to be probably a little bit more of a simple process for your conveyancer to go through or for you to understand as a buyer. If it's not titled, there's definitely some more technicalities, I guess, or complexities that relate. So this is, again, reinforcing the need for a good conveyancer to look after you, because there's no way as an individual buyer you can understand all of this and the implications of every respective path to go down. So it's important. On to the next one, Darren.
Yeah, I guess, Justine, tell us a bit about, we see it a lot, and particularly in busier markets where there'll be this expectation upon signing an unconditional contract. And what does that mean for the buyer when the developer, insists that the purchaser enters into that type of contract? Well, how do you guys best see that play out? And particularly in a busier market when there's things like ballots, you sign up on the day, there's all this pressure back on the consumer, take it now, you're going to miss out. And obviously that's big risks.
Yeah, it is a big risk, and people shouldn't take it very lightly at all. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't quite understand what that means and just sign away and then don't realise the implications of that. But basically, signing an unconditional contract means that you cannot get out of that contract. You can't terminate that contract for any reason. So if something happens during the process, and as we've talked about before, sometimes when you're buying off the plan, you could be waiting 12 months, 18 months, 2 years for the plan to be registered. Sometimes things change during that period of time. You've got pregnant, you've had a baby, you've lost your job. There's been, some sort of worldwide crisis like COVID, and things happen that you can't foresee. So you need to make sure that when you're signing a contract that's an unconditional contract, I think the biggest thing that I want to tell our clients is, can you buy it today? Make sure you've done your finance checks. Yes, I can pay for it. If I lose my job, can I still pay for it? If we get pregnant, can I still pay for it? If something happens down the track, are we still going to be in the same position to be able to buy it? Because if not, unfortunately, especially while the property market isn't as great as sometimes is, it's hard. Developers won't let you out of that contract, and they'll take your 10% or 5% deposit that you've paid, and you'll lose that money. And it's really sad circumstances that I see that happen, unfortunately, too frequently in my line of business. So I just, yeah, this market's really tough. If the property market's booming and the developer knows that he can get that block back and sell it for tons more money, generally they're more inclined to let them out and maybe just yeah, take some of the money. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I mean, there are other options like Kelly just said about nominating, but if you can't get out of the contract, then that is an issue. So that's the main thing that you need to be aware of when you're signing an unconditional contract. So it's just be conscious of this.
Just on that note,
Go.
one question I had, which isn't on our list of questions, but just a separate one. You mentioned nomination. So if a customer signs a contract, do they have to sign it and or nominee to be able to nominate that lot, or is it open slather to nominate anyway?
Yeah, you have a general law right to be able to nominate under a contract, so you don't have to put and or nominee like you did used to have to back in the day, but that was ruled out a long, long, long time ago. So you don't have to do that. Unfortunately, what I'm finding is some developers are putting restrictions on nominations. So they'll say their nomination condition in the contract, and again, this comes back to your good conveyancer reviewing this contract for you and bringing this to your attention, saying that you cannot nominate unless you get approval from the developer. You cannot nominate unless it is to a family member. So they're putting a lot of restrictions on. You can only nominate to someone who's going to use this land as their future residence, as their primary place of residence. Can't be to an investor. Like, I'm seeing all sorts of restrictions on nominations. Yeah, so you just have to be conscious of that. But if it does work, nomination is a great tool to be able to use that. If you can find another buyer to get out to take over that contract for you, which is what the nomination process is, you'll get your money back from that new purchaser for the deposit that you've paid, and then they just proceed with the contract on your behalf, basically. They just take over that same contract. So when it works, it is a great tool. It's also a great tool as a buyer to be looking at nomination land, but I think we talk about that later on. But so it is an option if available. If the developer lets you do it.
If available. So, Daz, I'll get you to do the settlement question maybe, but let's jump to the one after that because we've started on nominations. So I might just jump in there. So there are different types of land purchases, and as we've started talking about nominations, so essentially in the current market, a nomination is all day, every day. It's happening regularly. So if you are a person who had signed up, paid a deposit, signed a land contract 2 years ago in 2022, and like Justine said, something's happened. You've lost your job. You can't afford to settle on that block that's due to title in the next few months. You have the right, based on what the contract says, in general, you have the right to nominate that block to another person, meaning they can take that contract over and then pay you the deposit back that you paid because the developer's already got that money, and they will take your contract over and then you can get out of it. So a conveyancer is the only one that can make that transaction happen and that process happen. It's a very good thing for someone who's a bit stuck. Alternatively, on the other side, if you're a buyer, it's really good because essentially you can get that contract and take it over for the price it was back in 2022.
Yeah.
So that's why they're very popular with us. We do them all day, every day, Daz, because you can get a really good land deal, but also the person who was in it in the first place gets out of not having to settle, which is nice. Yeah. Okay. Other than nominations, we have some other types of land purchases. So I'll go to you, Justine. What can you name a couple of options to other people buying land in different types? How does that work?
So generally, there'll be real estate agents, who will be selling blocks of land. Most of the time that would be titled land. They're, someone's selling off a block of land and they've got it available. In most cases nowadays, developers are a big business and they put their little land sales office in their estate, and you go down there and you have a look at all the wonderful things that they're going to do in the estate, and you look at the block and and you buy it from a land sales agent. So I think majority of people will probably be buying from land sales agents. But if you're looking for a block of land, I think you also do a lot of research on Google, because you might snap up some really good blocks of land from a real estate agent as well. And, sometimes they also do the nomination process. They also help people with nomination selling if people are struggling. So you might find some good buys on there. And, this is something new that's happened to us recently, but we've had clients who haven't been able to get out of their contracts because their developers won't let them. And they're stuck and they've been in a situation and they've put their block of land on Facebook, and they've found buyers on Facebook through the nomination process. And those buyers have often been cashed up and ready to settle straight away because, unfortunately, sometimes with the nomination, the timing is very tight because it's often at the end of the period when people go, I can't do this anymore, we're stuck and it's 2 weeks to settlement. But, Facebook is also a great place to have a look. We've got so many avenues nowadays with social media and stuff. So there's all different places that you can try and look for land as well.
Yep. One thing though, for anyone doing that, because we do the same thing, there are lots of places you can find a block being advertised by an individual. Make sure your builder looks at that block before you do anything, because it's very likely that the site cost might be no good or things like that. We've seen blocks that are average blocks because of their fall levels and things like that. I've seen in Berwick, there was one I saw sold 6 times over the course of about a year and a half, because people are like, wow, it's such a cheap thing, and they went and bought it. And I'm like, I've seen this block before. You shouldn't have bought that block. You need to resell it because it's not good. Yeah, the site costs are 55K. So yeah, you saved 30 grand on the price, but no, you didn't, because your build price is going to go up as a result. So please, people, do not buy a block without going to a new home consultant. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Darren's business he works for or mine. Doesn't matter. Go to a builder and make sure that they vet the block for you and give you some feedback, what you can fit on it, and then what the site cost would be expected to be, just so you got a general understanding. Very important.
For sure. Hey, Justine, I might fire this question your way. Can you run us through what settlement means and how it works, and also the statement of adjustments and shortfalls of funds and what all that means at settlement?
Yeah, so the day of settlement is the day that it all happens, basically. So you pay your money to the developer or to the vendor, and the title gets transferred into your name. So it's the day that you get that property. So it's an exciting day for all. Basically, a statement of adjustments is the paperwork that we do, which is the accounting aspect of the purchase. So in there it has the purchase price, less the deposit, and then it adds in any adjustments that are agreed under the contract, which are generally the adjustment of outgoings, so council rates, water rates, those types of things. When you're buying off the plan, they will be portioned based on your area of your block. So if the parcel of land itself is, 1,900 square meters, then and you're only buying 900 of those square meters, then it will be apportioned down to what your value of that land is. There used to be land tax as well that you had to factor into that, but thankfully there was a legislative change late last year. So as of 1 January 2024, a developer is no longer able to pass on their land tax liability to you, or anyone is, and no vendors are allowed to do that anymore. So if you've signed a contract post 1 January 2024, you're in luck. You won't have to pay that. But unfortunately, if you signed before that, you will have a land tax adjustment liability that you'll have to pay. So that all happens through the statement of adjustment process. And all of the paperwork then goes through PEXA. So PEXA is the online settlement platform that all conveyancers now use. It's all set up and coordinated with your conveyancer, your bank, the vendor's conveyancer, and the vendor's bank. And we just put all the paperwork in this electronic platform and put all the money in there. And then basically the settlement goes through. It takes about 30 minutes for it to go through electronically. And then if something happens during the day and your bank's not quite ready, what happens is it just ticks over to the next half an hour time slot. So if you're booked in for 12 o'clock on PEXA and your bank's not ready or the vendor's not ready, then it will just tick over to 12:30, and then vice versa. If it's not ready by then, it will just tick over to 1 o'clock. Whereas back in the old day in the paper version, if you weren't ready at the time of the settlement and you were in the city and all the people were there waiting with their little bits of paper and their checks and everything, it was a nightmare. But nowadays, if you can't settle on time, it's not such a big deal. It just keeps ticking over until it goes through up until 5 o'clock that day. So generally the settlement day is the big day that it all happens. And shortfall is the difference between the purchase price, basically, the total amount that you have to pay, which includes stamp duty, registration fees, your conveyancer's fees. So your conveyancer will give you an amount that's called the total amount required for settlement. Your bank is going to give you a lesser amount normally than that because you don't normally borrow 100%. And then you have to come up with the difference between those two. So to make it very easy, if you're paying $500,000 total for the whole package, and your bank's only giving you $400,000, then your shortfall is $100,000. So that's what shortfall is. It's the difference between the two prices that you have to pay on the day, and you will generally have to put that in an account, either in your conveyancer's trust account or in a bank account that you've set up with the bank that they can access for those shortfall funds, and then we put those funds in PEXA, and that's how the shortfall funds get in there.
Yeah, one question on the tax thing.
Yeah.
You noted that people who signed 1st of January, that vendor can't pass on the land tax.
Yeah.
What if you are signing a nomination block that was signed 2 years ago, for example?
Yeah, that's a good
Does that
question.
apply
So
then?
the contract remains as it is, so that you will have that land tax liability passed on to you because you're taking over the original contract. So it doesn't matter what date the nomination date is. It's the date that the contract was signed. So you will be taking on that land tax liability. And unfortunately, it can be quite high too, depending on when you buy the land. So land tax runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So if your settlement is early in the year, your land tax liability will be higher because your portion of the land tax is much higher because you're taking over basically for the entire year. Whereas if you settle towards the end of December, your land tax liability is much smaller. Yeah.
It sounds like a positive change, really. I mean, obviously the government's announced much higher land tax levels in Victoria, so that's not good. But not having to take over that assumed risk of land tax from previous, I think, is a really good thing because that used to go on quite a bit and was a bit of a surprise for people when it happened. So.
It was. We had lots of people that unfortunately, once they got the adjustments with the land tax bill on it, and they're first home buyers, they hadn't factored in that extra $5,000 that they had to adjust for that land tax. So, and as a conveyancer, we don't know how much it's going to be at the beginning of that process when they sign that off the plan contract. We can't determine what that will be in 2 years' time or a year time. So we can only try and ask for that condition to be removed, which is what we would always suggest. But unfortunately, most developers won't change their contracts. So you just have to take it on. But thankfully, the government came to their senses and removed it. Unfortunate if you're a developer because they weren't happy about it. I can tell you because we act for some of those too and they weren't too happy. But as a purchaser, it was great news, and great news for conveyancers too, because then we don't have to deal with that stress on behalf of the client, because it was always a stressful period trying to say, oh my gosh, the land tax is going to be huge. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. So we're very excited about that.
Would there be any common items you deal with, or perhaps some tips that you could share with prospective purchasers that would make their conveyancing journey and their journey through from purchase to settlement as smooth as possible?
Initially, first, as I think we've all commented on, talk to a conveyancer first before you do anything. Do not sign that contract without talking to a conveyancer and talking to your builder. They're really the two most important things, because if you don't have all that information and know what you're doing before you go into it, then you can get stuck. So You need to know that you can build the house that you want to build on it. You need to know that the design guidelines suit the type of house that you want to build. You need to know that perhaps there's something in the land contract that will prevent you from doing something in the property, like building a great huge shed that you wanted to build out the back that you had planned, and you can't do that. So unless you've been given all of that advice, you should not proceed. So make sure that you do that first and foremost. Before you make sure you can get finance. I think, especially in the off the plan build, the contract market, you have to make sure that you can get finance before you sign, and make sure that you're comfortable that if something happens in the future that you're still going to be able to buy it. Or if you can't, what are your options? Be fully aware of what those options are. Are you going to be completely stuck? Are you going to lose your deposit? You need to be aware of that. Do you need FIRB approval? Unfortunately, we've had a few people sign contracts which you're not allowed to do without getting FIRB approval. So if you are not an Australian citizen or a permanent resident, you are classified as a foreign person, and you need to go and get Foreign Investment Review Board approval before you sign a contract, especially an unconditional contract. So just be aware of those, what you are allowed to do. Generally, developers are not supposed to let you sign a contract if you are a foreign purchaser, but unfortunately, sometimes it just slips through the system. Understanding the estate that you're buying in, that's also really important. Use Facebook, I think, to just gauge how people find the estate, how they found living in there, how they have found their dealings with the developer. I think that's really important. Some developers are lovely and some developers aren't that great. So I think just being fully aware of where you're buying, the area that you're buying in, who you're buying your land from, are you comfortable with that? So that's probably really important. Obviously building a home, but I think, the whole process it can be stressful. It can be long time, especially if you're buying off the plan. I think, but the end result, when you get that brand new house that you've built on, I'm about to do it again for the third time. So I'm a little bit passionate about not only conveyancing, but building, because it's just an amazing process. When you move into that brand new house and you have that brand new house smell, much better than a brand new car smell, I tell you that. But it's just it's just the most amazing experience. But you just need to make sure that you are fully informed before you do it, and that way the process will be better for you as well, because it's stressful enough. You don't need to add the extra stresses in if you don't know what you're doing. So make sure you know what you're doing.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Justine. There's some good tips. I think only bit I'd add is the feedback. It's great to hear, from a conveyancer's point of view, is like there are some good developers out there, but there's also some are really only interested in the dollar. So when you do go out there and look at a block, perhaps again, if you're going to find the very cheapest block, it's either A, going to be near some overhead power lines, or B, it's in a developer that's not delivering a school or parks or this and that, like actual amenity for you and your family to live in and have around your house. Some developers are really, really focused on that. So just be mindful of that. Like make sure you're buying in a state that you actually want to live in, and it's not all about just the price. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, Cole, I reckon it's been a great episode. We've certainly we've had some challenges on today's episode with some of the chopping in and chopping out. So what I would like to say though is a big thanks to Justine and Kelly for joining us. And mate, it's over to you for the wrap up, I think, mate. But it's been a fantastic episode. I picked up 3 or 4 real key elements out of today, which is superb, and that's the key, right? That's why we like to get such great guests on board, is to get those tips and tricks that'll help you along the way. So, it's been fantastic for me.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, we did lose Kelly about 10 minutes ago. She dropped off. So thank you, Justine, for stepping in there, taking over a few extra questions. So everyone, I guess, look, it's been a bit of a longer episode, but there's so much value, so many insights, and this is such an important episode for anyone looking to buy a block of land, no matter where or how. It's such an important thing to talk to conveyancer first. So again, same to you, Darren. I want to thank Justine. thank Callie for jumping on and giving us their time this morning. And thanks to everyone for watching or listening, whichever sort of platform you're on. If you really enjoyed what you're listening to, please jump on, leave us a 5-star review. That would be really, really helpful. If you've got questions, jump on homebuildinghub.com.au. There's a contact us option there, and that'll come through to myself and Darren. And other than that, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening to the Home Building Hub. As part of the podcast, we have to be a little careful to cover ourselves on a legal standpoint. So we do have a disclaimer. Whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered legal or financial advice. It does contain general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your own personal situation before you make any legal or financial decisions.
1,